to the Center Clueless podcast, the podcast that takes a day-by-day approach to politics. I am Billy Ray Brewton.
I am Erik Surwill.
And if it sounds like I'm coming to you from a cavernous cave somewhere in the sequoias, it's because I am recording in a new space, a different space, with more echo than my normal space. And that space belongs to Mr. Erik Surwill.
Yeah, you staying in the Airbnb, although it's not really an Airbnb. But we have an ADU that we created in the backyard for my mother-in-law, who will actually be taking. Of course, thank God, nobody in my wife's side of the family listens to this podcast because we're surprising everybody next week. But she's actually going to be here Thursday. I'm picking her up from the airport. So you're the last person that's not my mother-in-law to stay in that place. So how do you like it there?
It's pretty swank, actually. So Erik is treating his mother-in-law quite well. He has built this entire ADU for his mother-in-law, which he could easily rent out to some random Angelino for a couple $1,000s a month minimum. Easily.
Yeah.
But it's lovely. It's quite nice. I like that you have adopted, as I have, the frame TV, which I love, and I have one at my place as well. Mine is on a swivel. Is yours on a swivel?
No. I actually, to be fair, I'm unhappy with that install because you'll notice over there that cable going down the wall. There's actually a cable path in the wall that during the creation of the ADU, some person screwed it up. So I actually have to fix that so that you can't see the wire anymore. The other thing is, it's funny, now that you're there, I'm totally finishing the purchase of a black light so I can make sure that nothing was sprayed about in there inappropriately. Here we are.
Well, so when I moved into my place, I had this frame TV. My buddy Ben helped move me to Seattle, and we got this thing, and it was called something Mount. It was like, I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. It was like Power Mount or something like that. It was this big, heavy industrial mount.
Right.
And he tried to install it and failed miserably. And in doing so, sort of destroyed the mount and my wall.
Yes.
And so I had to bring in, I would say I brought in a professional. I just brought in a fucking TaskRabbit. And they did it in like 15 minutes. So that's not a slam. That's not a slam on Ben, who is certainly not by trade an installer or a mounting expert. But it's now up. It's the mount is built into the wall, so the screen is
flat,
like flush with the wall, but
like
then it can also pull out and swivel. So I'm a big fan.
This doesn't do that. We just wanted it to be flat on the wall because we knew where her mom would watch TV, and then we also wanted it to double, sort of like as a picture frame at some point. Turns out there's more to do to get it to be a picture frame. But you also totally just blew off my blacklight joke about you staying in my ADU, which is fine too.
I did blow off your blacklight joke because I didn't quite get it, but now I do.
Well, right. No, because if you look on any Airbnb forums, one of the big recommended tools is a blacklight so that your cleaners can focus on areas of the house that may have some type of biological juice. That's terrible. If you ever want to go down a Google hole, it's Airbnb blacklight. Oh my God. It's a horror show. And it's one of the reasons it comes up for me because it's one of the reasons why I don't think I could do an Airbnb because it's terrible. Like it's running a private hotel, and running hotels are terrible. And in fact, as many people may know, some hotels aren't run that well and are disgusting. And man, I could never put that out as an Airbnb. So I could probably rent it as an apartment. And I might, if my wife has this fantasy that we're going to move up to Ventura someday, and I'm down with the fantasy. It just requires that we as a couple make quite a bit of money. Yeah. And I'm not even going to put the numbers out there, but it's quite a bit. And if we were to do that, I would absolutely be renting these properties out as two separate properties. Yeah. But I'm never going to be an Airbnb guy or a short-term rental guy because I think that people don't care for places when they're in there. I think they get trashed, and I'm not doing that. That's a spot.
Next week on This Old House with Billy Ray and Erik and Billy Ray talk about pouring cement. This is what you tune in. This is what you tune in for. Is all of the awesome construction conversations and
I would love to do an Airbnb horror story podcast, but
that's actually a great idea. It might already exist, but if it doesn't, that's actually a really great idea. And if anybody out there is thinking about stealing it, I will sue your ass.
Right. Interview super hosts and hear all the fucking, because the stories are endless, and actually,
you know what it would be called? Scare B&B.
Scare
it would
B&B.
be. Look, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. This is a great idea for a podcast. I'm going to get to work on it next week because I need another podcast.
Instead of Cancel Corner, you do blacklight horror stories every week.
Blacklight horror stories. Just this is amazing. This is actually a great idea for a podcast. I'm sure it exists. I'm sure it exists somewhere. I'm going to be. Right. It has to. And if it doesn't, you've all fucking failed. Because I will say very quickly, I know this isn't a hotel podcast, but you mentioned this about hotels being a horror story. So when I was a kid, my dad was a bit of a cheapskate. Shocker, dads are cheapskates. And so anytime we would go on road trips, he was one of those people where he would only stay in one specific hotel chain. He would not stay anywhere else. And it was Comfort Inn. Okay. And Comfort Inn was the only hotel chain he would stay in. And when I was a kid, when you're a kid, it doesn't really matter, right? You don't really care what the hotel looks like. It's cool to be in a hotel, right? And so, but when I got older and I tried to stay in Comfort Inns, it was like, they're not the bottom of the barrel, right? But they're not, they're certainly towards the middle, lower tier of hotels. But I'll tell you this, and this is a plug, because I will occasionally rent a hotel in Silver Lake when I stay in Silver Lake. And, those Silver Lake hotels, and, I'm not destitute. I make a decent living, but I'm not going to pay $300-$400 a night to stay in a fucking hotel in Silver Lake. But they have a Comfort Inn in Silver Lake. It's right there in this really cool shopping center. And I got to tell you, I've stayed there a few times. It is the best ran Comfort Inn I have ever been in my life. The rooms are spacious. The rooms are clean. The staff is very, very friendly. Like they do a breakfast every morning that's like, feels like breakfast, but feels like it's actually homemade. It doesn't feel like it's just undehydrated stuff. And so like anytime I go to Silver Lake now, I will stay in the Comfort Inn there. And like, because it's nice. And I'm like, and I only pay like $130.
Right? It's newer though, right?
I mean, ish, but like it's $130 a night or something like that. And I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. So that's a plug out to the Comfort Inn on Sunset in Silver Lake. Please go there and prove me right or prove me wrong.
The way Galloway, my wife and I have dealt with this is we just go to places that have either been recently remodeled. You look for those, and it's generally nice and clean in those places. Like I went and stayed in Central California to go to Thanksgiving at my brother's, in the middle of nowhere, and they had this remodeled Hilton. Some kind of Hilton Suites. It was so nice, so clean, and the same experience with breakfast. They had someone making pancakes to order. It was like, what? It's a continental breakfast. They're making pancakes and waffles to order. I didn't have any because I'm trying not to be super fat guy. But the point is that they would even do that. You're right. It's turned now into an Airbnb podcast over here.
But it's not what we're going to spend the whole episode about, because we do have a few, some weeks are busy news weeks. Some weeks are less busy news weeks.
Yeah. This is a less busy news week.
This is a less busy news week. This is one where we just kind of get to scat on some things that we're interested in talking about. Hopefully you're along for that ride. And if you're not, please try to research that Airbnb podcast that we talked about and let us know if we need to copyright that shit or if we're already fucked. I always like starting off the discussion with a certain amount of zaniness. And, we do still have a Looney Tunes character in the race for the White House in the form of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And let me just start by saying this. I had texted Eric earlier this week because I had listened to the RFK Jr. Interview on, was it Pierce? I think it was Pierce Morgan that I sent. It's Pierce Morgan. And we won't get into the Pierce Morgan of it all. But so I listened to it and I was like, because usually with RFK, and I'm just talking about the vaccine conversation, right? Usually they will take what he's saying out of context or they'll just play clips from it. And Pierce Morgan let him give a full throated explanation of his stance on it. And I listened to it. And even though I don't agree personally, like I don't, I was like, okay, this doesn't sound as batshit crazy as the way they slice and dice a lot of what he's saying. And so I was actually starting to feel a little bit of empathy for RFK Jr. And then literally within like 48 hours, the motherfucker goes on a rant about how like the Jews are trying to like.
Well, I mean, he said that it wouldn't surprise. Okay, so
He's talking about bioweapons. He's talking about bioweapons.
He's saying that the concept of the virus having been bioengineered to not harm Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. And then immediately 1 million people on Twitter, or thousands of people on Twitter, are commenting about their friends who were Jewish or Chinese who died of COVID. And it's like, come on. What a ridiculous fucking thing to say. It's not a bioengineered to affect blacks more than Chinese. Which he said that. It affects blacks and what was it? Was it whites and blacks? Or was it
No, it affects black. Yeah, no, I think it affects whites and blacks, is what he said, I think.
Whites and blacks, and then it affects Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese less. And it's at that point that's really all. Look, I'm going to say it. That's all you need to know about RFK Jr. is that quote right there. Anybody that could say that out loud with any level of seriousness is unfit to be president of the United States, period. The fucking end.
I would agree, and I'm never going to even feign empathy for this man again. I don't care. Like, it was a moment of weakness where I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe he's not as crazy on this issue. But then, of course, and maybe he's not, but he's so crazy on other issues that it cancels it out. Like, he's a fucking nut job.
Go ahead.
And I was gonna play that clip, but I was like, I'm not gonna make you listen to him stumble and stutter for 2 minutes over this point. And this is not a slam on his voice because that's a medical condition, but it's like he's not the easiest person to listen to. It's like listening, it's like reading a sentence with like 66 ellipses in it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, it's funny. A lot of people talk about because he has some form of it was a disease, right? Where it affected
it was affected his vocal cords, and I mean, he can still talk fine. It hasn't affected his ability to speak. It's just he's got a gravelly voice now.
I am lucky in that, and you know this about me. When people have difficulty speaking English for any reason, I have this filter that allows me to hear them, and I never have a problem hearing him because of that. But what comes through loud and clear for me, after you get almost the folksy effect of his halting voice, get the fuck out of here. He says stupid things. He says stupid things constantly. And what's crazy to me is that he's not upside down in favorability ratings yet. But I just think that he's sort of a catch-all right now for people who want to be concerned about Biden and our Democrats. But he's capturing this. He's capturing people out in the independent space and in the Republican space. It's
I think what it is I think he is capturing a large number of of Democrat voters who are tired of Biden. He's also capturing a large number of Republican voters who don't want Trump and don't want those options as well. So he's capturing these sort of disaffecting lefts and rights, not to mention a certain amount of the center. And I doubt that they necessarily agree with all of his bullshit, batshit theories, but they think he's the best option of what's out there. And that's dangerous to a large degree, especially if he decides to go rogue and run as an independent. And that's going to, all that's going to do is ensure that Donald Trump is president.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. What's funny is, and I won't go far into this because this wasn't one of the topics, but what scares me about the election is the amount of people that are poised to possibly run, including Manchin with the No Labels group, RFK as an independent, Trump as an independent if he loses to DeSantis, and could you imagine,
is seeming less and less likely.
Less and less likely. But imagine DeSantis, Trump, RFK, fucking Manchin, and Biden. I still think personally Biden wins in that, but man, that is a recipe for disaster. Because even if Biden won, nobody would be satisfied with the election results from that type of a campaign, right? With that many people actually going down the road, it would be terrible. This year is honestly
it would be
terrible.
it'd be like a California gubernatorial election,
Which is never good.
which is like, oh, who are we going to vote for? Arnold Schwarzenegger, Angeline? Who are we going to vote for? like who are we going to vote for? That's exactly what it would be like. But of course, we know at this point that RFK Jr. is a nut job. So, but that said, I think this is a good time to segue into a little thing that we like to call Cancel Corner. That's right, everybody. It's time for Cancel Corner, where we talk about the latest cancellations on the left, right, wherever. And lately, there hasn't been as much canceling going on, so we haven't had as many to talk about, but we do have one to talk about here, and we touched about it on last week's episode, and that is the new motion picture event, Sound of Freedom. And I say that because it's already made like $80+ million at the box office.
Yeah, but hold on a second. So what I've heard, it has made that money.
But they're buying like people are buying like wealthy, crazy QAnon Republicans are buying tickets for other people and for buying out theaters.
Yes. Not just that, but at the end of the movie,
they ask for money.
Provide you an option to pay it forward, which buys tickets for the next.
Yeah.
And there are people saying that the whole theater's been sold out and there's 10, 15 people in the theater max.
Oh, sure. No, that's exactly what it's. But that said, look,
bullshit going on there.
Bullshit or not, that money still goes to the production company. That money still gets counted as ticket sales. And it's already at a crazy amount. And I'll say this, I mean, I'm sure it's a competently made film. They don't make these films poorly. It's just that everyone behind it is awful. And like this is usually our cancel corners are cancelings that we think are maybe a little overblown. This is one where I agree with it 100%. Like this is a movie about child sex trafficking that is positing that Democrats are child sex traffickers and pedophiles. It is created by people who are actually.
Wait, is that really? Hold on. I apologize because I should probably know more. Is that really what it says?
I don't know if it's what it says verbatim, but it's certainly what it's insinuating. And so. You know, and then you've got like Jim Caviezel, who is like a QAnon nut job, who is leading this thing. And it's about and the people who are producing it and creating it are convicted like abusers, sexual abusers, and like the people that they're talking about stopping are the people who are funding the fucking movie.
Right.
And it's like, but you've got these like, of course, like you've got this whole contingent, this QAnon contingent, this far MAGA right contingent who are just eating it up.
Right.
And the fact that it is, regardless of how it's doing it, the fact that it's doing as well as it is really fucking frightening.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to be fair though, one of the areas where people really haven't seen, I think, or understood over the last 30 years is there are entire sets of book sales that we never see on the New York Times bestseller list. And they're almost always in the religious space, right? You know, books that show up at religious bookstores or around that niche in the United States. And these books are doing more numbers than some of the best sold books. And so there are films like that as well. You used to not see what's interesting about this for me is that this film is being placed into that ecosphere. Yeah. And this is what it looks like. And that is people who are rich will often fund the purchase of these media, whatever it is, whether it be books or movies and then they're giving it away for free. And it's a part of the way that I think money is used to promote these types of whatever the mindset is, beliefs, all of this. And this, I think, exposes us to that kind of really almost the astroturfing of the political right by some of these organizations. It's kind of crazy to me, but
no, it's very and like here's the thing, like I certainly don't want people to think that like I just have, because I mean Sound of Freedom is essentially a faith-based movie. That's
Right.
essentially what it is. And
Right.
I don't think they're all look, I'm not someone who is religious myself, but that said, like I watched that movie from earlier this year called Jesus Revolution, which has got Kelsey Grammer in it. And I'm like, you know what? It's a faith-based movie, but it's well made. It was entertaining. Like I don't get anything spiritual from it, but it was an entertaining movie. I'm not against faith-based movies. Like I watch all sorts of movies that I don't agree with that I can still
Right.
enjoy. But like
Right.
this is a little bit different. Like this is politically activated in a way that just seems a little gross. And the fact that it feels like it's exploiting a real, like serious issue and doing it in a way that is so politically motivated, I think is just disgusting. And
Right.
look, these folks involved are gonna make a shit ton of money off of it. I'm sure they're gonna have another one of these fucking bullshit movies out in a year, if not sooner. It's called Angel Studios. I think it's their first film. And
Right.
I'm like, that's capitalism. That's America for you. But like, I'm certainly not giving them a dime of my money. I'm never going to watch this piece of shit except to maybe do like a stoned comedy commentary on it.
Right. Like a mystery theater.
No, you know what? This is my pledge to you. This is my pledge to you. Once this podcast gets to a certain level in terms of downloads, Erik and I will watch Sound of Freedom from a comical standpoint. We will get stoned and we will just riff on it throughout the entire movie.
We'll do the Mystery Science Theater. We'll do exactly.
Yeah, we will just
corner.
We will riff tracks that shit. And so this is actually something. This is a good segue. This isn't really part of Cancel Corner. We're gonna leave Cancel Corner.
But real quick before we leave Cancel Corner, what's interesting about this is that it's not actually canceled.
Oh no,
it's
no,
not canceled.
It's
people
not canceled at all.
People want to cancel it, but this is something that maybe the left is making attempts, but the left has talked their way out of any credibility in the space of cancel culture. So where you may need to have your voice to say, this is some bullshit.
Yeah.
If you've gone after, I mean, I don't want to go too crazy here, but if you've gone after people for say, taking other people's cultures, cultural appropriation or any of that stuff, at this point, you spent all your energy. And now when there's something that is completely toxic to culture, you ain't got shit to say and you shouldn't have shit to say. And that's sad. But go ahead. What were you going to translate to?
We're going to take a left. So we're on Cancel Corner. We're going to go down the street a little bit. And this isn't Cancel Corner, but this is adjacent, right? And so I started listening to a new podcast, and it's on Free Press, which is, I know that's a trigger for people because that's Barry Weiss's baby is Free Press. But it's called the Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling.
Oh, I've listened to it already.
Yeah. I have not listened to it. I've just started. And it's fascinating. And like, I did this deep dive on like reviews of it on like Vulture and places like that who are slamming it and calling it transphobic and all this shit. But let's be clear. If you're not 100% with the trans agenda, you're considered transphobic. So let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
So this is a podcast that talks about, all of the uproar over J.K. Rowling's tweets, which was about the trans community. And actually not really to me about the trans community so much as it was just about, pro-woman. But and it takes such an interesting look at it because the host name is Megan Phelps Roper. who is from the Westboro Baptist Church, who grew up in the Westboro Baptist Church. And Fred Phelps is, related to some degree. And she
Isn't
left.
that her grandfather? Phelps is her grandfather.
Yes. Yeah. And she left the church. All of her family is alienated from her, and she's now started devoting her career to sort of exploring these issues. And what's interesting is, and I'm just going to say, like, I disagree with so many of the reviews I read about this podcast because I think it takes a very balanced and very nuanced look at this.
So how much have you listened to of it?
I'm only one episode in, Erik. I'm only one episode in. I'm going to listen to the rest on the drive back to Seattle.
Let me tell you this, that first off, I'll say that about that podcast, I'm not going to spoil it for you.
And people out there are probably like, we've already listened to this, but like, we're just getting to it.
Old,
so
right?
Give us a break.
Roper is amazing as an interviewer. And what's funny is I've now listened to interviews of her on other shows about having, like, I listened to Josh Zepp's, his interview of her. And that was like one of her first gigs that she did. She just like rolled in on J.K. Rowling, and she wrote a letter to Rowling. Rowling invites her to the fucking castle.
Yeah.
And let's be clear, and you'll see this, Roper goes all the way deep on every side of it.
Yep.
And it is probably, that, to be fair, I think that that's one of the best podcasts I've heard in the last 5 years, like how it presented itself. Let's be clear, Rowling is not the hero of that podcast, nor, by the way, is she the foil.
No,
and that, to me,
no.
is amazing. It's just
exactly.
the facts, and it's the facts from the various lenses.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they invite every single voice to the table.
Right.
Like no voice is left. And again, let me be clear. Like I said, I only listened to the first episode, but I have done a lot of research on it because I was like, I was skeptical at first, and I was like, I want to make sure that I'm getting into something that I'm going to get something from. And in that first episode, I was like, I'm already in safe hands. I knew I was in safe hands with this host and with where this podcast was going. And, you know, I've been saying since the whole J.K. Rowling shit happened, it was like, we have to find a way to differentiate between anti-trans and pro-woman because there is a big difference there.
Right.
And people are saying like, well, J.K. Rowling's just trying to get sympathy talking about her past. And I'm like, well, are you saying that someone's past doesn't inform their opinions and their viewpoint of the world? Of course it does.
Right.
And this is someone who's lived 57 years or whatever it is as a woman. She suffered incredible loss. She suffered incredible abuse. She's suffered all this. And like that informs her personhood as a woman. It absolutely informs it. And so to say that she shouldn't consider that is frankly ludicrous and obnoxious.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And there is nothing that she says or has said that I personally have ever interpreted as anti-trans.
Well, so I mean,
this is the person who created an entire book series about acceptance and about othering and about accepting people who are different than you. Like, it's almost like the Roseanne conversation, right? About like Roseanne being a racist, and I'm like, well, you're gonna have to bring some receipts to that because everything that I know about Roseanne says the exact opposite.
Well, I mean, so the trans, in fact, that's why so many. So I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna speak from their lens for a moment.
Sure.
So many trans people feel violated by her because they saw her as this idealized ally. And so she's suffering from what many people who are very popular suffer from is there are these parasocial relationships that people have with you. And they saw her as this idealized ally. And what I think the disconnect they're having is she is an idealized ally for a second wave feminism. She's absolutely that idealized ally. And in the space that second wave feminists have for transgendered individuals, she's absolutely balls out pro-trans. On the other side of it, she's going to, I mean, in this case, the key thing where there's the two areas where I'm going to assert she's primarily outside of the space that transgendered advocates want her to be in, is she still believes that biological sex is an important distinction, that there should be spaces where biological women are allowed to restrict access to biological men of any flavor, including trans women, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And then the other one is, I said two, and watch me forget. I lost my train of thought, but here we go. It's coming back. And the other place is she doesn't like the change in verbiage that people use, in terms that people use. Look, I'm sorry, but when someone refers to a vagina as a bonus hole, you're fucking losing the goddamn script, I assert. But many people in the trans rights community want cisgendered people specifically, cisgendered heteronormative people absolutely, to just take what they say as gospel and adjust their lives as, and that's just not going to happen. I'm never going to go to my wife, let me get in that bonus hole, baby. Are you kidding me? It's fucking ridiculous. So that was the tweet. The first tweet, and they talk about this, I think, in the podcast, is she tweets something about instead of birthing person, she wants them to use mother. And that's the tweet that got her in trouble. And
Yeah.
you'll see they go over this. Another kind of interesting thing is a lot of people at least some people, transgendered individuals, as an example, Natalie Wynn or ContraPoints, she's angry at Roper. Right? She's angry that she was included in that. But let me be clear. When you listen to the podcast with ContraPoints discussion, it absolutely gets the point across that transgendered advocates want gotten. Plus, Natalie Wynn is a genius. Let's be clear. At least I assert she's a genius.
Yeah, and I'm a fan. I'm a fan too.
But like, I'm glad that you're watching it. You know what's funny is I never talked with you about it before. No. I listened to that podcast, and like I said, the first thing I got is that Roper is amazing, and the second thing I got is, man, how complex and fucked up is the situation around this, what's going on with her and the amount of crazy hate she's getting, and it's just
oh my God.
Nuts.
Well, and it's like, and I'm sort of on a journey myself right now, but my journey is to really I'm really trying to I'm trying to build up my support for the trans movement. Like I am, I do consider myself an ally. I do consider myself I've been having these conversations about trans rights and trans inclusion since 2008 with the very first queer film festival I ever worked for. We were having these conversations back then before a lot of other, frankly, queer organizations were having them.
Right.
And so when someone suggests that I'm anti-trans, I take that very personally because I've worked for a very long time to understand the trans movement, to support the trans movement. But I don't believe that entails that I have to drink every single drop of the Kool-Aid.
Right.
Like I just don't. And I don't think that makes me transphobic. And look, I mean, I'm not the one. I'm sure people are out there like, well, you're not the one who would make that judgment. And that's probably right. But I mean, isn't it better to have more people supporting you, even if they aren't 100% with your agenda? Like, doesn't it? Like, is it? Why would you want to alienate those people?
Yeah. I mean, the concept that the only acceptable position is to be 100% accepting of every single norm change requested, right? The space of, and I'm just getting into the more radical conversations in the space of that because you have a genital preference, for instance, right?
Yeah.
That's somehow anti-trans for a lesbian woman to have a preference towards vaginas versus penises, and the concept that that's somehow problematic. And by the way, for a long time, there was this sort of like gassing going on where I had friends tell me that that's not true, that transgendered women are not expecting lesbians to suck dick. And I'm sorry, there are, and it's being pushed. And the weird thing I was getting hate because I informed them about a problem that they didn't believe existed, but actually exists. That loop, there's several of those. There are, when you have, there's Chu, the transgendered advocate that just got the Pulitzer. Andrea Long Chu, calling the asshole the universal vagina. Stop. I mean, okay, do it. But don't expect the rest of society to just adopt the asshole as the universal vagina. That's crazy. That's crazy. And I can support a transgendered individual's rights to fair and equal treatment.
Absolutely.
Without believing that the asshole is the universal vagina.
Well, look,
I'm not going to do that. Sorry.
My mother is 66 years old. If I were to start calling her a birthing person, A, it would break her fucking heart, and B, it would break my fucking heart.
Right.
So it's like why try to assert that on somebody? Like, you do you let me do me, and as long as we support each other and respect each other, like that should be enough. And here's an example, and I won't go much further down this rabbit hole. And I don't think I've had this conversation on the podcast yet. I think we might have had it together off mic, but
sure.
I've gotten into arguments before with coworkers and with friends because I refuse to, in most cases, I'm not going to say all cases because some cases I have, but that's more for my job than anything else. But I don't talk about my pronouns.
Right. You don't put them on your
I
in your
refuse to.
email. Yeah, you don't put them in your
No,
email
they're
signature.
they are in my work email, but they're
Oh, they
not in
are.
anything yet. They are in my
Okay,
work
cool.
email.
Cool.
But that said, like if we're doing an event or we're doing a meeting or something, everybody says their name and their pronoun. I don't do that. But this came
Right.
up recently because I was me and a coworker were working on some graphics for our website for the company for the organization I work for, and it was for staff. We were getting new staff images and stuff up, and she was like, "Oh, you should include pronouns." I was like, "Oh, you're absolutely right. I should." So I went on there and I created little pronoun boxes, but I didn't put one on mine. And she
Right.
was like, "Oh, well, you got to put one on yours." And I was like, "No, I don't want to do that." And what it turned into was this like uncomfortable discussion about why I should do it. And it was like, no. I was like, I don't care what you call me. You can call me he, she, them, they, it,
Right.
them,
Right.
za, whatever you want to call me. I'm going to understand that you're talking to me and I'm going to respond. And if that's not enough, you can just use my name and call me Billy Ray. But I was
Right.
like, as to how I feel internally inside, that is nobody's fucking business.
Right.
I
Yeah,
choose
I
I
agree.
choose that for myself. And there should be no difference in me making that choice for myself versus someone deciding that they want to lead with their pronouns front and center. And the reason that I feel that way, I'm a gay man. Being a gay man is about the sixth or seventh thing I identify as. I
Yeah.
am so many more things before I
No,
am
yeah,
that.
you don't lead with that. You're
No,
you're a director, you're a
I'm a
writer,
no
you're a
no
film guy.
even more than that. Like I am a son, I am a
Right.
brother, I am a friend, I am a filmmaker, I am a writer, I am a southerner, I am all of these things. I'm a podcaster. Like I'm all of these things before I am a gay person. I choose to not let my sexual identity define me, and
And it
there's
doesn't.
nothing
Yeah, and
wrong
it
with
does,
that.
and it doesn't. It doesn't define
Yeah,
you.
and there's
And
nothing wrong with that.
yeah, I too resist the pronoun upfront thing. There are other things in society that became temporarily, although I think that to be fair, as you and I have begun this podcast in the last couple months, the pendulum swing coming back, like here's the mistake. As an example, when Microsoft did the land acknowledgement,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I mean, I think it's important to understand what
absolutely.
the Indian. And so my daughter and I had the discussion about, as an example, in Burbank, there's this thing that's weird with the hills in Burbank. You look at those mountains out there, when you go out the window, you notice they're always foggy.
Yeah,
The Indians in the valley here used to call it the Smoky Hills. And so that's an example of a way that I've discussed how the history's been with my daughter. Like, as we've discussed in this podcast in the past, I believe in teaching the full history to my daughter, but it's not going to show up packaged in the social justice wrapping
yeah,
because I think it's ridiculous, because it's performative, and because it's largely directed and driven by white people. Let's
yes,
be honest. And
yes,
I see this as a power grab much more than an educational event, right? And that's why I'm going to teach my daughter about everything. And
yeah,
I also do key things with my daughter so I know that there are things that push a European white culture onto a child. I tend to not do those things, but not again through the wrapper of social justice, or in this case, the wrapper of queer ideology. My
yeah,
daughter
yeah,
is going to know about people like you've been talking to my daughter.
yeah,
We didn't
yeah,
go, and Billy Ray is gay. We didn't do
yeah.
that. We just said Billy Ray's staying out there. Why would I be discussing your sexuality with my daughter who's 7? It's ridiculous. And
Yeah.
what's great about it is, as I talked with you, she's like, when is he going to be available so we can talk? You know, she wants to
Yeah.
meet you. And you
Yeah.
see by just, and again, I'm not even trying this, but what hits me as we're talking about it, one day when she finds out that you're gay, eventually we'll be friends, I'm sure, for a long time. Especially after you have children, and especially if you eventually move back to LA.
Oh God, yeah, I'm just going to dump my kid on you all the time.
No.
I'm kidding.
I'm just saying that my daughter will be in a space to figure out eventually that you're a gay man.
She can babysit.
Right. And what the effect will be on her, though, is our totally normal and loving discussions with
Exactly.
you as an individual for the last 10 years. Sorry, I hit my bike here. Before she finally has to, Why would I tell my child that you're gay? Like, and that's the kind of, I think, where there's a disconnect. There's
if you tell someone something like that, you're setting up this idea that it's different.
Like it's something. It's
like
a
it's
thing.
something. Exactly.
Right? Which is why I don't want her review. Which is why I don't want her school reviewing this with her. Now I'm starting to sound like a Republican. I don't care. I don't need the schools to review with her this until she's in her teens. Then go ahead, have an adult discussion about it. That's something that I expect then. But the concept that at 7 or even at 10 or 12, that this is something that needs to be communicated to children, because I don't support that, there are people out there that will say that I'm not an ally. The way I'm actually an ally is I don't think it's a problem being gay or transgendered, and it shows up in how I treat those people individually, and that's the way it's always going to show up. I support a gay person, transgendered person, or any of the flavors around that. Right? Any of the non-normative, non-standard, right? When I say standard, I'm talking normative standards, right? I don't do any of that. I don't do any of that, because what I want, especially when it comes to my daughter, I want my daughter to experience it. And then she comes to me like the consultant I am, which is really the position I take with her. I'm your reality consultant. I'm the one that's going to, like that's how I even have that discussion with her now. And I think it's broken. I think the concept that you should have to deal with pronouns in a way that's performative is a broken concept, because what ends up happening is that it isn't the most important part of who you are. And then eventually, if it gets around to it, it's going to be at a party someplace where you've met an attractive man that you might be attractive to you. Sure. And then he's like, by the way, I'm gay. I don't know if you're gay, Billy, but I would love to go out with you. And you're like, yeah, and let's go. That's when it's important, there. And so the only way to normalize transgenderism, the only way to normalize being gay is for it to be normal. Yeah. Not a special thing, but just normal. Just something that's like another thing on the list of shit we do over here. And I just that's how I'm going to deal with it with my own daughter. And I wish that's how we dealt with it in society. Because so here's the weird thing. When Trump got voted in at the agency, motherfuckers are coming up. So that's how it is, right, Eric? That's how it is. And I'm like, what do you mean that? Like this one woman, I actually
like you voted for Trump.
Like I voted for Trump. I'm like, hold on a second. I hate Donald Trump. I'd have never voted for that mother. I voted for Hillary. What are you talking about? They're like, oh. So you see the weirdness of that. To this day, when I deal with people who are transgendered, they're often shocked that I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. I use the How about if you give me a set of pronouns to use, I use them. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm probably not going to use she, zir, zhao, all that.
No.
But look, they, them. I got to be honest with you. I use that religiously, and in fact, I'll fucking practice it in front of a mirror if I need to make sure that person gets what they need to be fulfilled. That being said, that's how you deal with it. Is I am who I am, and you are who you are, and I'm going to do what you ask me to do because that's normal civility
within reason.
Within reason.
Here's the thing.
I'm not going to call you princess.
No. Here's the example, right? Like I'm the same way. Look, if you. He, she, they, them, however you want to be identified, I'm going to do my absolute best to respect that and to make you feel as welcome and as appreciated as possible. I'm going to use those pronouns. Look, I'm a human being. I slip up sometimes. I've had 35 years of neuro training, and so I slip up sometimes. And you have to have grace for that. You have to have grace for people who are going to mess up occasionally. And I don't have a lot of respect for people who will latch on to a pronoun fuck up and then just read you the riot act. I'm like, I don't need that. That doesn't help. That doesn't help me. So like, I thank you, but like, you've got to have grace for that. But if you come to me, and I had someone who, I'm not going to name them obviously, who applied for a job for me once, who wanted to go by the pronoun goddess and goddess X. And I didn't hire that person. That wasn't the reason I didn't hire them. I didn't hire for them because they really weren't qualified for the job. But had I hired them, there's no way in hell I would have used those pronouns. I'm not going to call anybody a goddess who hasn't fucking earned that title. And secondly, are you really just trying to make it uncomfortable for people? Like, Like,
Oh,
why
man.
would you I don't understand that. And maybe that's just a lack of education on my part. And maybe I do have more work to do in that area. But
No.
I'm like, why would you demand that someone call you something like that? Like, I am not going to break, like, I'm just not going to do that. I'm
Right.
sorry. Like, if you want to be called he, they, she, they, them, absolutely. I respect that. I'm not going to create words as pronouns
Yeah.
just to satisfy. I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. And and people are out there like, "Oh, you're transphobic." And I'm like, "No,
No.
I'm pro-grammar." Like
Well, no, but I
I'm
mean,
pro-grammar.
just to leave the pronoun conversation where I think it needs to be, pronouns were created so that I could categorize you in my mind. That's how they've always been created. So it's it's a given that it's going to be my viewpoint which governs what I call you. It's not a problem that you say, well, Erik, I, I may be biologically, as an example, I may be biologically a woman, but I don't really identify with the gender expression woman. I'd prefer you if you use they, them. Okay, sure, sorry. And if it's in their pronoun, like if they've notified me,
Yeah.
okay, sure. I'll go ahead and I'll do that because I
Yeah.
respect you. But I think that a lot of this mess, and I'm okay with it because this is what, what's funny is I'm like this liberal, or at least classically, I was a liberal in the past. People maybe don't think that as much anymore. I've always said that I want society to become more civil. I want there to be less suffering. Well, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
As you decrease suffering in society, the line for what is considered suffering will move. And that's what this is. This is people finding reasons, finding excuses, finding things to suffer about. And it's funny because you were here and I had this. I got out the book and I showed it to you. Shit, where is it? And it's that. Oh, yeah, here it is.
Erik is rolled back in his chair to get a book.
I'm telling everybody now. Oh, you can read it. This is the book you must read. Read this book. And it's hard to find.
Well, for people listening, it is called Pickpockets, Beggars, and Rat Catchers, Life in the Victorian Underworld by Kello Chesney.
Sorry about that. I always forget that we're on podcasts mostly. That's where most of our listeners are at. You read that book, and it's about Victorian England between 1850 and 1890-ish. It is the most terrible description of reality that I have ever read. And it's real. It's how it was. And it was so terrible. And it was only, 135, 145, 150 years, 170 years ago. And there are people today that are going to want, and to be fair, a lot of the people that are in the social justice warrior space, they'll make comments like, this is the worst time in history and you are out of your fucking mind. And I think that a lot of the suffering, air quotes suffering, or is it scare quotes, suffering around some of this stuff is a fact that life is so good that we need something else to proclaim as a downfall. And what it is the concepts for, the awareness of how vicious society was up until the 50s. And it was only in the 50s that the concept of conquering another country became, something where like, wow, that's probably a bad idea. Pre-1950, it was totally acceptable to invade another country and take their shit. I'm not saying it was right, but I'm saying it was absolutely normal. Like I'm not saying there weren't people that didn't say this was bad. I'm saying that 99.9% of reality thought that was normal. And this is what it looks like to become more civilized. And so I also try to counsel myself, and I'll counsel all of us here in the listening, try to be good with people as they're getting used to this new space of civility and, frankly, lack of suffering.
Yeah.
Now the game is, how do we progress as a society that suffers less than we did in the past? And I think it's a very difficult thing. And what's sad is there's so many people that want to tear everything down. And I'm like, don't look now. You're actually, so when someone says, we need a revolution, destroy capitalism, burn it all down, you're like, yo, you're trying to get back. I'm not going to pick the book up again because I realized again we're on the podcast. You're trying to go back to 1850 1850s Victorian England, you're out of your mind.
Well,
And that
like,
was just 5 minutes ago, right?
yeah,
It's
I get
crazy.
annoyed with that stuff too, because it's like, ask your grandparents if life was better during the Great Depression. Ask literally, like, ask a Holocaust survivor if things are worse now than they were back in the 30s and 40s. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, it is
Ask people about World War II. There was rationing going on in World War II so much that everybody. So on the street, I live in my grandmother's house, and she was here during World War II. And dude, everybody had a victory garden, and everybody specialized in a certain type of vegetable or vegetables, and they sat and traded with each other. And that's how they ate vegetables for 2 or 3 years during the war. Think about that. Imagine if that's what we had to do now. How many motherfuckers wouldn't be eating vegetables? And see, that's also a key difference. Back then, almost everybody had a victory garden. Here, right now, imagine if rationing started. Could you imagine the heads that would be exploding if we had to ration food right now?
Here's a good example. Like, let's just take the pandemic, for example. Like,
right.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the pandemic wasn't awful. It certainly was. But let's say this. Would you have rather been in the pandemic in 1912? Because let's just be clear. We all had to stay at home with our TVs and our Apple TVs and our Rokus and our computers
and our air conditioning
and our smartphone. And not everybody. Obviously, I know not everybody has those. It's not
speaking from privilege, though.
Universal description. But I'm like, generally, we stayed at home with all of these ways to get by. Would you rather have done it in 1912? I certainly wouldn't have. I'm certainly happy that I had all of those luxuries and all of those, accommodations. And so, yeah, it's that idea of like, oh, it's the worst it's ever been. And anytime someone says that, I'm just like, have you ever read a history book? Have you ever?
Do you confront them openly when they do that?
Oh, absolutely, I do.
Yeah, I've done that.
Where it's
too.
like,
it's
so things are worse than they've ever been. So tomorrow, when you hop on a plane and fly to Jamaica or Italy or Australia or wherever, is that what you're thinking when you're flying through the air to this country, that it's the worst it's ever been? Because I can think of some times when it might have been worse. Personally.
And to be fair, this is you and I doing the Gen X boomer.
Absolutely. Even though I'm technically a millennial.
I know you're a millennial, you're a cusp, but still, you know what though, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with part of the voice of being a Gen X guy is I was lucky to live with silent generation. My mom was part of the silent generation.
My dad
as well as great generation, the greatest generation people. And I'm going to tell you something. They were some motherfuckers. And my grandmother's boyfriend, Emil Carl, who was in World War II, who would sit under because it was so hot. He was a technical sergeant, and he was the top gunner in a B-17 bomber, and he was an artist, and he would sketch comics under the plane of the B-17 when he had to jump out of the plane because he got shot down.
Yeah.
He broke both legs when he landed on the ground, and it was the French resistance that got him out. This guy, before World War II, was stealing from people's gardens to eat during the Great Depression. This is how he lived. And he was part of a family of 17 kids or 12 kids. It's 12 or 17. Honestly, I can't remember which. Both is huge numbers. And nobody nowadays gets that was not uncommon. That was very common. And so, yes, as you stated, our pandemic experience, especially for those of us who are privileged, right, we were well healed. We were playing video games. We were doing shit we were yelling at each other on Twitter, all of that.
Look, I had the luxury of treating it like more of a sabbatical. And I know not everybody had that luxury, but because look, I don't have kids yet. I didn't have to deal with all of that. Like, I understand that it wasn't that way for everyone, but let's be clear, even for a lot of people who had kids and who had to go through all of that, and you still have even the lesser among us who had to suffer through the pandemic probably still had a smartphone.
Yeah.
Probably still had a television.
Yeah. The agency I work at, those people are people that are on Medi-Cal. The vast majority have smartphones.
And it's
over 90%.
So it's like this. So that idea, I bet people in 1912 would have killed for a fucking smartphone.
Are you kidding me?
They
Are you
would
kidding
kill
me?
for a smartphone.
Like the smartphone has, it literally would have changed society like it
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
now. And
Yeah.
so we by the way we are beating the shit out of this
I know.
fucking.
No, we're actually going to take a break now. So we got to throw it to a word from our sponsors real quick, and then we'll be back with more rambling, which we've been doing a really good job of today on this slow news week. So stick around, and we will be right back. We are back with the second half of Center Clueless after a bunch of ranting and raving. And guess what? There's more to come, everybody. We're moving more from the social side of it to the straight up political side now, which seems appropriate. But, Erik, I think we can still start off with a little lightheartedness. Why don't you talk to us about what our good friend Janet Yellen's been up to in the world of psychedelics?
So I was looking for stuff, right? Because it's been a slow news week.
Very
and
slow.
So what percolated up was there Janet Yellen in China went to like a local restaurant, and in that restaurant they specialize in using like various things from the local, sort of space, and in this case there was this thing of Zhan Shaoqing, I think I could probably butcher that, mushrooms, which turned out to be commonly psychedelic, and she had 4 servings of this raw mushroom. And my God, someone there. It's funny. It's because it's interesting because as far as we do the cancel corner thing, the right wing is coming at it from this is why she had such a terrible showing afterwards when she had her greetings that she apparently flubbed the greeting, and people are saying she was tripping on mushrooms. She did look a little out of it though, and I can't imagine the failure of the handlers there that she has. Shouldn't you Google those fucking mushrooms? Are you guys? I mean, this is not I guess it is uncommon, but it's a common. If you Google those mushrooms, there's aside from the 50,000 news stories about it now around the world, by the way. So while it's not big in the U.S. yet, it is huge across the planet. Imagine your handler fucks up and you eat psychedelic mushrooms and then go meet a Chinese delegate. I'm like, Jesus.
Well, it would have been a lot worse if she stood up there and pledged to give $500 billion to Sonic the Hedgehog and then started having an imaginary conversation with him off to her left. Then that would have been like,
by bad you mean awesome, right?
Oh, I do mean awesome. That would have I would have written her name in for president had she done that. I would have absolutely done it. Yeah, I just thought that was a fun way to kick it off. I think that's hysterical. I love that. I like anything that humanizes these people in a big way.
And by the way, what's funny is that psychedelics as a use in psychotherapy
are really beneficial.
And not only it's oddly beneficial and started to become. Haven't a couple of states now legalized it?
I have a lot of friends who microdose. I've considered it myself. Look, I've done every type of hallucinogenic known to man throughout the course of my life.
Wait, have you done mushrooms?
I've done mushrooms more times than I can count on my hands, toes, and your hands and toes.
Right. So it's not really. It's funny because the last time I did mushrooms, I'm outing myself here, maybe. Whatever, let them fire me. Last time I did mushrooms was in the summer of 2015, right before I met my wife, and I did them. I went to a river excursion. We went to the Kern, and it was, to me, it was awesome because it was like a shared thing. Everybody in the camp mostly did it. It was like a broth, right, that this guy prepared, and then you're in the, it was awesome. And to be fair, maybe cleared my palate mentally enough for me to be available for my wife, honestly, because I went right back into dating after I got back from that. I was doing Match.com, and I just decided to adopt a very healthy relationship with Match. If you see a match, you go on a coffee date with them. If that works out, go on a real date with them. And if that works out, you're great. And I did a few coffee dates with a few people. And then I did the coffee date with my wife, Gelleray. We sat there for she was 20, 30 minutes late because she locked her keys in the trunk. And that was kind of cool because to me, I made up that she was nervous maybe, and she was, turns out. And then we sat and talked for 3 hours. at a coffee date. And I said, hey, you want to go out? And so we went to Sushi Wednesday, and then it was over. It was really over with at that point. I hadn't been away from my wife since that time for more than a couple days, except for once in the 7 years since that time. So to be fair, I think that mushrooms may have some ability to get you out of the rut, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe Janet Yellen gotten something good out of it. Who
Let's be
knows?
clear.
We'll see.
It's like a reset. Like it's like a reset. It resets your bodily chemistry to some degree, and there's
Or at
nothing
least your
wrong with
brain.
that.
At least your brain chemistry.
Exactly. And it's like, what's wrong with that? Like, certain things work for certain people, and certain things don't. And like, we were having this conversation off mic. Like, I used to work for a hypnotherapy clinic, and look, her success rate, you can't argue with it. I ran that entire clinic for almost 5 years. I never had anyone complain, say it didn't work, ask for money back. But that said, it's one of those things where hypnotherapy doesn't work for everyone.
Nope.
Right? Like it works for some people and it doesn't work for others. Now, you can still get benefits from it if it doesn't work for you, but it's not going to be the same type of benefits that you get if it doesn't. And if it does. And so not everything works for everybody. Psychedelics aren't for everybody, but they are for some people, and they really help some people.
Right.
And what's wrong with that? Let them do it. Like most of it is microdosing. Like, let people microdose if it makes them feel better. Like, let them do it. Microdosing isn't enough to make them go fucking crazy.
Right. No, they're not going to.
It's like people. No, it's like
they're not going to show up and just break down.
No. It's like, let people do it. Like, isn't that great that we're in a place in society where we're having all of these advancements and discovering all these new tools to help people out? Like, let's embrace those instead of being
I've done neurofeedback, and I'm going to tell you something. It's absolutely effective. The problem with many of these modalities, including neurofeedback, including hypnotherapy, is you got to keep doing it, and it costs money. That's the real drawback.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so then moving on to this is the more political part of the podcast. So if you're burnt out on politics, just skip to the end. But so let's talk about favorability ratings, because we had a whole thing last week where we kind of ran through all of the candidates and talked about them in a very loose way, kind of a fun way. But I mean, some of the favorability ratings among these candidates are a little shocking and a little scary, frankly. And so I think the biggest shock is the person who has the best favorability rating sort of across the board, which is RFK Jr.
Yeah, he's 49% favorable. So this is the latest YouGov, Econ YouGov poll. 49% favorable, 30% unfavorable, with a plus 19 favorable, by far stomping everybody. The next closest person, who's, in other words, the only other person who's above water, meaning there's more favorability, is Tim Scott. But Tim Scott sits at 27% favorable and 27.1 favorable, 22.8 unfavorable. He's the only one that's not underwater. All the others, you got Ramaswamy, 23.1. Ramaswamy, I'm an idiot. So Ramaswamy too is above the list of me.
Oh, there we go.
23.1% favorable, 15.8% unfavorable. But then that's it. DeSantis.
But let's be clear. Part of that reason is because most people still don't know who the fuck he is,
right? Same
and
thing
all
with
of
Tim
the
Scott.
bullshit that he espouses.
Right. Same thing with Tim Scott, although I would assert that Tim Scott would maintain his average on the way up, but we'll see, because Tim Scott, I think, is going to become a player once we get into the debate space.
Because name recognition is a big part of it, right? And like
if you look at, go ahead.
The only two people who have 100% name recognition are Biden and Trump. And then right under them is but DeSantis isn't at 100%. I don't think.
Is he? He's not.
No. I don't think he's at 100%. I think he's under them.
Okay.
But like
DeSantis right now is 35% favorable, 45% unfavorable. Trump is 40% favorable, 56% unfavorable for Trump. Jesus Christ. And Biden is the same as Trump. Like Biden is. There's like a 1 to 2% difference, whereas Biden's got like a 42% favorability and a 53 or 54% unfavorability. Yeah. So Biden and Trump are in the same mess, right? Whereas nobody, and maybe that's just a reflection of people just want something new in there. God, who was the other one? I didn't write down. A couple others, but in the real realm,
Yeah.
in the real
Let's be
space
clear.
here.
Let's be clear. Doug Sogrum or whoever that guy is who's doing like donate $1 and I'll send you $19, which is generally what he's doing because you have to have 40,000
Yeah,
donors in order. And like, so he's literally like, send me $1 and I will send you 19.
he's
Like,
buying his way in.
we
Yeah,
don't need to talk about him.
yeah, he's buying his way in. Right.
Yeah. And it's not going to work, which is the sad part.
Nope.
But yeah, so it's okay that we exclude some of these folks. They haven't shown their ability to rise above.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing that's crazy for me is, and what I want to see now is now that RFK has gone down the QAnon hole officially, right? Let's see where his favorability ratings go.
Yeah.
I mean, because there were some pretty big influencers that loved him. And I mean, guys that are like, a big deal, right?
Yeah,
I mean, maybe not a big deal, but as an example, there's a somewhat conservative commentator named Coleman Hughes, who in the centrist community has a lot of cachet, and he's a young guy. He's under 30, very intelligent, and he did a full-throated defense of RFK on on a podcast a few weeks ago. I felt bad. I was like, oh no, how are you snowed, motherfucker?
No,
and now he cannot stand now with those types. I think he's finally shit the bed. And like you and I had discussed, my only concern about him now is as a third party candidate.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm not worried. Here's the thing. The Republican race is still, no one has shown an ability to really go after Trump. I mean, nobody. Yeah. You've got some candidates who are rising. Let's be clear. Chris Christie's poll numbers are rising slowly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're better in New Hampshire right now. I mean, they're good. They're rising a lot better in New Hampshire. But
right.
They're rising,
which is where
slowly.
It matters, right?
Yeah, but they are rising slowly. But but so are other people's. Like Tim Scott's are slowly rising too. But nobody has shown an ability to actually go after Trump in a way that is going to matter.
Right.
And, and part of it is because they're all cowards. They've been drinking the Trump Kool-Aid for the last 6 years. You don't drink the Kool-Aid for 6 years and then be like, oh, this person is this, that. No, you've lost credibility there. And I like Chris Christie. He's my favorite of the Republican nominees, but he's going to have a really hard time getting over the fact that he was a Trump lackey for a very long time. Yeah. And he can say all he wants. Well, I turned on him when he tried to overthrow the government. But you didn't turn on him for 4 years when he did some pretty awful shit.
Right. He's going to look. He looks like a disgruntled employee, whether he likes it or not.
But his approach, I like his approach of attacking Trump and saying but attacking him in this way, where it's like, I don't think he's fit to be president. I don't think he is. Don't we deserve better than this for a president? I like that approach, and look, I'm not the first person to say this. Every political podcast is saying it right now, but it's like he's making an argument against Trump, but not making an argument for himself.
Right.
And that's the problem. He's not telling us why. He's got here's a good example. He's got an insane record as attorney general, or is 100, did not lose a single corruption case. 130 something victories, did not lose a single case. That's something that he can really run on and say, if you want someone to actually drain the swamp, if you want someone to go after corruption in the government, I'm your guy, and I have a 100% success rate.
Right, and the intellectual space in the Republican Party is having that same conversation, that you may like Trump's policies. Trump isn't the person to get it done. That's Barr's. That's William Barr.
He's failed. Chris Christie's things is he is a multiple loser. Look at all of these things he's lost. Look at all these promises he made that he didn't keep. And those are all accurate arguments to level at Trump. So it doesn't work to go after him on him being an asshole or him being, going after all of these different people. That doesn't work.
The people that are voting for him want that. I've had Republicans argue that he's the monster we need. They just get the fuck out of here. But that's what they think.
No, and it's like, that's how you've got to retrain that group, right? Is like, we don't need a monster. We need somebody who can get stuff done.
Yeah, we need someone who's competent.
And Trump's entire campaign right now is vote me in and I will get revenge on the government.
And by the way, he's an idiot. You realize what Trump's doing right now is he has gone to war with he has now had negative things to say about the 4 most popular Republican governors, some in states that Biden won. Yeah. Like in Georgia. You're going after Kemp? Biden won that state.
Oh, no.
Kemp won that state.
He's going after the governor of Iowa. That's the first caucus that's happening. He's going after the governor of Iowa because the governor of Iowa is not supporting him. And do you think that's going to make her want to endorse you? Like, really? That you're going to go after her like that? And
how crazy is it? This is how he's going to go out. This is how Trump's going to go out. He's going to go out because he can't stay on. He's undisciplined, which is the argument that Christie and Barr are making. He's too undisciplined. Look, we all have how we feel, and that's great. But feelings don't get the job done. It's your actions that get the job done. But
here's a good suggestion. Here's a good idea. Here's a thought. If Trump had not said that the election was rigged, right? Let's say that he came out and said, "Look, I have concerns about some of the election results, but I am going to step aside and I lost this election." If he had done that and January 6th doesn't happen,
right,
he has a much better shot of winning this, much better shot.
Right.
And and that's the crazy thing. If he had just been smart enough in the moment, if he had thought long term instead of short term, he would have had much more credibility in going against Biden, and there would have been a much higher likelihood that Trump is elected again as president.
Like right now. And to be fair, the argument made about the news organizations generating and driving the conversation. Yeah. You can make that argument without calling it cheating. That's nothing new. Are you surprised that journalists are driving a conversation? It's been that way since the beginning of the country, and it's not appropriate to call it cheating. It's appropriate to call them yellow journalists. If you want to go down the road, although nobody uses the term yellow journalism anymore, you can go down the road and you can make fun of them. You can go down the road and discredit them. That's absolutely appropriate to try to discredit someone who's making comments about you that you don't agree with. But to call it cheating, and by the way, it wasn't just that. He had all of the nutballs that were working for him, who are now, by the way, mostly being disbarred. Like, what's his name? Disbarred just recently. The guy, I can't. It's funny. We go down the road. I don't remember anybody's name, but all of the asshole lawyers.
We don't proclaim to be experts, people.
Yeah, we're not experts, but all of
that's the whole point of this podcast.
All of the asshole lawyers that worked for him are now being disbarred and disciplined, and it's like
that's why no lawyers will work for him anymore. That's why he can't find attorneys anymore.
Yeah, because he is. I think that he's lost his marbles. I think he's like that old guy. You know how some older people, specifically older men, they'll get into a space where they're just going to be self-destructive and they're going to shit on anything that's put in front of them. They're going to do it their way. And okay. And then you let those guys drive the car into the wall. That's how you deal with it. And so that's what's happening. You have the Republican hierarchy. You got, all of the old school bosses, right? Yeah. They're just letting him shoot himself in the foot. And they're many people are trying to get with DeSantis to try to get him over the hump. But DeSantis, too, shot himself in the foot by trying to out-Trump Trump. That's not the way to beat Trump, is by out-Trumping Trump. You have to give the Republican electorate an option that contrasts with Trump. And instead, DeSantis tried to out-Trump Trump, and he's reaping what he sowed, which is a mess.
Well, yeah. I mean, DeSantis's problem is that he's just so unlikable. Like he has not given anybody a way into him. He's just naturally unlikable. He is naturally awkward, and he's running to the right of Trump, which in itself is already a terrible idea. And he's like, let's be clear, his favorability numbers are dropping in Florida. Like he's losing everybody. Like
he's harming himself in Florida. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's the point. Like the only thing that I would love to see happen, which won't because some of these people will have dropped out before then. I would love to get to the Florida primary where Trump, DeSantis, and Suarez are. I would love all three of them to still be in the race when we get to Florida because I just want to see who carries that fucking state. Because at this point, like, it's probably Trump who would carry it. I think he might carry it over DeSantis.
Yeah,
but like, it's never going to happen. Like Suarez will be out of the race before Florida. Like there's very little doubt. And frankly, DeSantis could be out of the race before Florida because I don't think he takes Iowa. I don't think he takes New Hampshire. And then South Carolina is. I actually think Tim Scott has a good chance of carrying South Carolina. But we'll see, right? But
I haven't looked at that. What is DeSantis polling in Iowa?
I think he's just under Trump. I think he is second. I think he's polling under Trump, but I think I haven't looked at it in a few days. But Iowa is the place. Like Ted Cruz won there last time, right? Ted Cruz won Iowa, so Iowa is going to go evangelical, which is probably going to lean itself to Trump. But you don't know. Like Iowa could go in a lot of different directions. And I think. New Hampshire is obviously leaning Trump, but Christie is making up ground in New Hampshire. I think if Christie has any shot of taking an early state, it's New Hampshire. But he's got a lot of work to do.
Two polls recently were, wow. And when it was just Trump DeSantis, it was 45 Trump, 43 DeSantis, 12 undecided. But recently, it is right now Trump 53. DeSantis 39, with 8% undecided. So DeSantis is slipping in Iowa as we speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a slight skitter here because we didn't get to talk about this, and I just think this is hysterical. The fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene was kicked out of the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah. So, by the way, I just saw that. What happened?
So basically, they just kicked her out. They were like, so this is Ken Buck, who's a representative from Colorado. This was his exact words. She's not a member of the Freedom Caucus, and she shouldn't be in the future. And she was kicked out for attacking other Republicans. And this all stemmed from that catfight between her and Lauren Boebert. And it all stemmed from that. And I'm like, really? That's what it took to get Marjorie Taylor Greene kicked out of something? Like, I could think of about 1,000 reasons why she should be kicked out. This is consequential, though. This is consequential because not being in that caucus, she loses a lot of her power. She loses a lot of her, people aren't going to care as much.
Yeah, but she's still a financial kingmaker, isn't she? She's got money behind her.
She's got money behind her for sure, but that doesn't help her. Like losing that party doesn't help her. Where else is she going to go? She's not a mainstream Republican. Like, and good for them for kicking her out. I mean, I hate saying anything good about them because they're all monsters, but like good for them for kicking her out and at least having some fucking standard.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. I have nothing good to say about a lot of those people in fact, the Freedom Caucus itself had a very sort of libertarian bent when it first hit the ground running. But as most people who've studied their early success, the way they did it was based on the backs of creating, an issue around people immigrating, around primarily Mexican immigration. And so it was frankly somewhat racist at its core. It took advantage of concerns about illegal aliens to create its initial surge of support. And that's like how Eric Cantor got knocked out, was by the person who was against them leaned on the fact that Eric Cantor was a pro-DACA person, as an example. I'm pretty sure it was pro-DACA. He was at least pro-concept of immigration by Mexicans, Hispanics from Central America. And that's the reason why, since that was one of the things that made that caucus so powerful, to me it's gross. As a guy that grew up in LA, okay, from 1970 on, the single biggest bullshit line you got was the racist conversation about Mexicans in the 70s and maybe early 80s was that they were lazy. Okay, that was the racist conversation, and that is ridiculous.
Oh, they're the hardest working group of people on the planet. In different ways, right? In different ways, like you can make a case that Asians are the hardest working, but it's in different ways, in different capacities.
But the concept that there was some cultural
it's ridiculous.
flavor of Mexicans that was laziness is fucking ridiculous. You
don't do what you have to do to get to this country if you're lazy. You don't go from, look, if you're poor and Mexican and you live in a shanty that's fucking aluminum siding as walls, and then you walk across the border where many, if not all of the women are raped, where if not all of the men are robbed, okay, or at least beaten or taken advantage of, get here and then deal with the fact that you don't have, if something illegal happens to you, you don't feel comfortable going to the police. I was recently reading about the old Martin Luther King in L.A. They actually call it Killer King in L.A. It's crazy that the Hispanics that went to that hospital and got mistreated, they're like, oh, this is just like the terrible hospitals back home. Think about that. Yeah. Like, oh, the wrong leg was operated on. Our daughter was brought in, and they gave her enough drugs to knock out an adult male. Shit like that, and they just thought that was just like the terrible hospitals back home. You don't live in that terrible reality and be not strong. You're strong, and I just think that there's all these conversations about Hispanics, about Mexicans that were used by that caucus that were just lies. And that's how I know they're racist, because they were lies. The fact that DeSantis has made it more difficult to hire undocumented aliens in Florida, and you're looking at tens of thousands of open positions for construction, I think it's the funniest thing you've ever seen. Motherfucker shooting himself in the foot with that. Look, America used to have an attitude towards primarily Mexican, but Central Americans in general, which allowed for a migrant population of farm workers, as an example. So you could be Mexican, you could migrate up north for the picking season, and then go back to Mexico afterwards. No harm, no foul. That got turned into a political football. Ironically, it was Clinton that killed it, right? Yeah. Clinton trying to out-Republican the Republicans, which is how he won, right? Yep. You
now have the mess you have. And really what America needs to do is create an immigration, or at least a come to America to work situation that honors these people, because they're Mexicans and Central Americans are a major part of the American economy, and we just need to go ahead and get real with that. I've had other people say that that's the reason why we should lock them out. Honestly, the black conservative position is they take jobs from blacks, which is crazy too. But okay, I think that there's a place there for us to make a policy change that works for everybody. Instead, these fucking assholes wanted to turn it into a scare tactic. That's why they're monsters.
Well,
and by the way, they don't even like MTG.
Well, we can agree on that. Well, on that note, we did get some feedback for the show, and it was more of a question. And it actually, and I'm choosing this intentionally because I think it's a good time to discuss. But they asked, and this is JC from Bremerton, which I must be somebody that I know through Seattle in some way, because Bremerton's close to Seattle. But nice. But anywho, they asked, "Are you going to have guests in the future?" Because as people know, the show started out with, like, each week we would have a different guest, and we segued into more of just Eric and I. And the answer is yes. I think what we decided is that we can just switch up the format however we want to, right? So yes,
Right.
we're going to have guests on in the future. We've still got some guests lined up. Dr. Astrid Hager, who was on an episode earlier, is going to come on
She's doing a
for
series
multiple
with us.
appearances. Yeah. We still got former Governor Don Siegelman, who's going to come on at some point when the schedules align. Like there are people that we're going to have on, but we're also going to have some episodes where me and Erik are going to be doing some debate episodes where we choose a topic and we debate one another. And like, we're just mixing it up. Like we realize we don't have to have a set format for this. And I honestly I enjoy kind of just sitting and talking about issues without guests sometimes. And so
what I also want to do, by the way, just to add to this, is I think that should you have a desire to even debate with us as a listener,
absolutely,
I would love to just bring you into this and have you talk with us. And I wouldn't mind doing that because I think that since it's just, we're not presenting ourselves as political experts here, and we're not at all, right? We may be experts in other things, politics, but I think that discussions with non-experts, which can turn terrible, I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to have someone come in and basically let me know I'm wrong, or at least I have more to think about, right? Before I'm going to make some of the ridiculous claims that I may be making. And that too, I think, is another area where we will probably expand. I want to get some of the conservative people I know on here so they can, because what I think doesn't happen is there isn't a good old honest discussion about the base conversations where conservatism and progressivism completely separate. And it's important to do that because when you have just the basic debate between a conservative and a progressive without the ad hominem, right? I want to talk about, because if you talk to a conservative, they're gonna where it really falls? It falls into they don't believe in utopia, whereas many progressives do believe in the ability to create a utopia. That's a very important conversation because that's what's plagued for instance, capitalist communist conversation for the last 150 years or 120 years, right? Since Marx penned his book. And
by Marx, he means Richard Marx, Canadian singer Richard Marx.
No, I really think that those discussions will, and when you really get down with the fact that that's really what it's about, that progressives are generally utopianists and conservatives generally aren't. And if I had to go that route, the truth is I was more of a utopianist when I was a kid. And now, after all these years, I'm not. I don't think a utopia is ever possible. I think that human being doesn't ever want utopia.
That's the problem, though. That's the thing, though. I don't want a utopia. You need struggle. You need conflict. Like, these are things you need.
Billy Ray, closet conservative, speaking up. Here we go.
It's not that I don't want people to be happy and be able to live their lives. And obviously I do. But this idea, I don't want that. We have to have some amount of struggle. We have to have some amount of strife. We have to have some amount of conflict. We have to. Otherwise, it's just it's gonna just end up, we're gonna be Fahrenheit 451 in this motherfucker, and I don't have any need for that.
Right. And yes, I agree with you. And we do want more people on here to interview. I also want to interview some conservatives as well.
Because we've had a
very left-sided setup, and we in fact we're in talks with many conservative people. I'm not going to name any names, and as soon as one of them's ready to go, then we'll go. And what's going to be?
And I will approach those conversations in total good faith.
Yep.
And that's the issue, though. That's the issue when you're doing a podcast like this and trying to get conservatives on, right? Is they just have this idea that you're just going to be attacking them for an hour.
Yeah, they don't want to get hosed for an hour.
And belittling. Right. And I understand that. And it's I have no desire to do that. I may not agree with them and I may adamantly disagree with them, but I will approach a conversation in good faith and listen to them and not belittle them and not make them feel, and not other them to some degree. So it's so I have no desire to do that. I don't think that gets us anywhere as a society. It certainly isn't going to make me learn anything by doing that. Right. And Yeah, if you're a conservative, I don't care if you're far ass MAGA. Hell, if you're QAnon, I want to have a conversation with you because I do not understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, let's hear it.
And I want to hear it. I'm telling you right now, if you're QAnon and you come on here, you're not going to convert me. I'm not going to agree with you. But, at least I can relate to you maybe on a base level as a human being.
Right, but let's have an honest conversation about it. Let's talk about what the space is. But so there you go.
Well, here's some stuff. The Center Clueless podcast is produced by Ryan Verrill. Hi, Ryan. Please visit us at centerclueless.com for more information or find us on the socials at Center Clueless. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and please do that. I don't think people know, but the rating and reviewing on Apple Podcasts, and I think you could do it on Spotify now as well. It actually really does help. It helps us rise in that algorithm, and we start getting, it just really, really does. So please do. Just take the 3 minutes it takes. Leave us a review. Again, if you've got something nasty to say, obviously I can't censor you and tell you not to post it, but I would encourage you, email us and let us know. Don't post it on there.
Yeah, email it and let's talk about it. I'm down with that too. I want to hear it.
Exactly. But, but I can't tell you not to. It's a free country. You can do that if you want to. But please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you have a question, comment, or criticism, email us at centerclueless@gmail.com. And until next time, whether you're left, right, or somewhere in the center, we hope you're a little less clueless, just like us.